Hi and welcome back everyone. This video is a continuation of my previous one on my personal project, The Nest Egg, and I'll be showing you what progress I've made with the ideas and characters. I'd recommend checking out the previous video before this one just so you can get an idea of the initial world building. So most of my new visuals are still in the idea sketching phase, but are starting to help me build up the world a lot more. One design I've built up more from the thumbnail was my hot air balloon that's used to reach the nest egg high up in the clouds. My main thumbnail idea was inspired by a plate of cut up toast with an egg being heated up by a pan as the balloon in the middle, and I decided to move forward with this concept and create a more detailed drawing. I modelled the balloon roughly in Blender to have an easier time drawing it from the perspective I wanted, so I could show more of what the inner part of the balloon would look like. I pictured it with seating circling all along the edges, with the tops of the chairs being curved to look like the tops of bread in shape. And the balloon is attached by rope tied around, and I kind of wanted the rope to look uneven and curved in how it wraps around the balloon, as well as the balloon looking like it has different layers to it so that the visual looked a bit more like a cracked egg. The design does still need some refining, but I was pretty happy with how the drawing turned out, and I really like how it looked in front-facing view especially. So toast wasn't a visual, which actually helped to inspire a couple of other ideas I was thinking of for the nest egg. So for example, I plan to have a whole host of employees working here. The more main characters will have their own unique workspaces that I'll design later on, but I wanted to create the spaces where the regular employees who just do day-to-day paperwork would work. I needed to think of what their workstations could look like and how their paperwork was stored on their desks, what other items they might need for this type of job. I think back to my themes and I landed on the visuals of people at a breakfast table, like having eggs and toast in the morning, and I thought this would be an interesting type of visual for the employee's workspace. I found some reference images of breakfast and toast trays, and I felt this was the perfect kind of prop to use for how the paperwork is stored on the desks, along with the ink. The shape of the toast inspired the papers, which are slotted into the tray, with an ink pot on one side, which resembles a large jam pot, and a stamp on the other side, which I've shaped like an egg cup. I drew a second version where the paperwork is also folded up like little triangular slices of toast. Whenever I'm struggling on how to make a design more interesting, I always go back to my core themes that I want for the project, because using those to inspire the shapes of my props really helps me to elevate the design and make them feel a little bit more part of the world. I mentioned in my previous video that I wanted the interior of the nest egg to have a massive labyrinth which needs to be navigated in order to reach the vaults. So at the time I didn't have any visuals then, but I have started modelling and thumbnailing some ideas I had for it. So I'm sort of picturing the building interior to start with the entrance reception area, where the clients go in, have their credentials and vault location checked, and then you enter through one of these two massive archways to a staircase, and this leads down to like a docking or anchoring station for the transportation around the labyrinth, which you travel around using the river networks. At first I was just picturing the transportation being like a boat, but I didn't really feel like I was thinking about linking it to the theme of the nest egg enough. I was just drawing one because it felt like the more obvious kind of visual for a mode of transportation that moves along a river or canal. And a normal boat would probably still work really well, but I wanted to come up with something a little more different for this, and something that was a little bit more in theme with the world. So after thinking about it a little bit more, I looked at my visual references and I saw a picture of an egg box, and I kind of liked the simple shape to it, and I thought about this as being the shape of the boat with the rings on the bottom, like kind of reminded me of like where little propellers could slot in a bit like a hovercraft. The concept of a hovercraft felt more interesting to me than just a regular boat design, and it actually made a little more sense as I plan for the river network and the labyrinth to be like a mixture of water and clouds. I did also mention previously that the nest egg is going to be functional through the use of anti-gravitational energy, so having a hovercraft which uses this energy feels more fitting for the theme. And I know I could just have like a boat that flies, but I like the simple visual of these egg boxes, and it felt a bit more unique and on-theme. I deliberated whether I wanted a specific employee who commandeers the craft, but I liked the idea that they can be operated by any employee who just needs to get around the labyrinth, as long as they have their own key that gives them access to the controls. And I haven't done a visual for this yet because it's an idea I had quite recently, but I'm thinking about the patterning on the top of the hovercraft being like the control panel, kind of like a device that has like a screen touch to it. Designing the actual interior of this hovercraft docking station I wanted, as well as how this is going to be the starting area of like a massive labyrinth, it was a little bit of a challenge. So I always had like the idea in my head that I wanted it to be like a massive room with huge archways going off in all directions, but it was just figuring out how I wanted it to look. At first I thought about a circular room with a giant domed glass roof, but this felt a little too open and inviting to me, as this is a place where important items need to be stored in secured vaults so that they couldn't be stolen. In the end, I kind of landed on it being more square-like in shape with a flatter roof and completely windowless, which I did like a little bit more because it was more trapping and claustrophobic. And even though it's like a massive room, it being massive seems to help it feel more intimidating and exposing to any potential thieves. I think having these corridors and hallways also massive is a bit more unsettling when you know that they're home to the heads and tails, which are my bird-like creatures that watch the labyrinth for intruders. So they're kind of like the extra eyes for my watchstyle character, who's going to use them like how a security guard would use cameras. As I was designing the Blender model, I thought about where the birds could be situated around the main area and all along the labyrinth. And I liked the idea that they made their little nests in cubby holes all around the upper walls and columns, which they used to spy from to rest and socialise with their flock. I want to explore and draw up world building of these creatures a bit more, as I have their concepts and backstory mostly ready, but I like to build up all of the world building and characters first so that I can tweak it if it's needed. The Blender model is always really useful for drawing these scenes, either as a final artwork or just to illustrate some quick concept ideas. I like to just draw over the model for the perspective, and it helps me to shape and size the props around it, like this flooring mural I'm planning for the docking station at the labyrinth entrance. You may have noticed the octopus visuals to a couple of my props, and this is because I'm planning the boss of the nest egg to be a giant octopus-like creature. So originally I was going to have a bird-like creature as the boss, which I thought would make more sense with the nest egg theme, and it felt like more of an obvious choice. But I was struggling to think of a design I actually liked or felt worked well for the boss. Most of my other employees are going to have a bird-like aesthetic to them, so I kind of wanted a boss design that would contrast with them and set them apart visually. I thought since they're more bird-like, perhaps the boss should also be more egg-like in design maybe. And after thumbnailing a couple of sketches, it was still just feeling a bit off. I think I was just focusing too much on making the character more of like a humanoid or like just a person with an egg aesthetic to them. So I thought to myself that this character is going to be the one who possesses the anti-gravity energy and runs the entire nest egg with it. So perhaps I should try and think more abstract, make this character feel like they are the source of the anti-gravity, not just a wielder of it. And there's also something more cosmic to this character. Anyway, it became a whole flow of just like connecting the dots in my head at once and realising that an octopus design to the character felt like it worked really well for the world. It builds on and expanded the pre-existing themes of the nest egg, and it kind of worked really well with the anti-gravity theme I want, as I just sort of had this picture of my head of like an octopus swing through the water as if it's floating through it. And I also just think the octopus design is really fun. I love the visual of them doing multiple tasks at once. It matched the theme of a stressed out boss with paperwork flying around everywhere. With the anti-gravity, it's like lining up ready to be stamped and sent off. And the final design does need some fine tuning, but I like the utilisation of the shell for the top of the head. It kind of reminded me of yolk spilling out of an eggshell, which I thought was a really nice little visual. So that brings me to my last couple of designs to show, which is mainly of my thief character. So this is currently my most developed character for the project so far. I made a couple of tweaks to the design, not changing too much, but just little things, so like changing the trousers to a dress, since I kind of liked the layered effect, which looked a little bit more like bird feathers. And I know I could have just done maybe a layered effect to the trousers, but I don't know, I quite liked the look of the dress underneath the waistcoat. I thought it was just a nice little look to it. And I did some colour palette experiments, but eventually opted for a black and white theme, since the design for this character was mostly inspired by a magpie. I also did a bit more development for the holder of the thieves' spoons, which they use as like their little device to constantly break into the nest egg. So building on the concept I had for it, so it is looking like two bird claws that hold the spoons in place. So I've developed it a bit more, so it currently looks like it's being held up by like a bird skull, which holds the spoons in place then. And the design still needs some further refining with some more facial and expression exploration for the character themselves. But yeah, no, that's all I have to share for the second part of my project. Everything's still in a bit of a rough stage at the moment, but it's been really fun to document the progress of the project as it grows from the starting phase to hopefully fully a built-up world, and I'm looking forward to sharing more about it soon. And thank you so much for joining, and I will see you in the next video.